but there's a group of patients whose blood pressure remains high even after taking multiple medications. This is often called resistant hypertension. This is where the device-based approach becomes interesting.
This is the Discovery Files podcast from the U.S. National Science Foundation. I'm Nate Potker. According to the Centers for Disease Control, nearly half of U.S. adults have high blood pressure, increasing their risk for heart disease and stroke. It has been estimated that 10% of people with hypertension or high blood pressure have resistant hypertension that doesn't respond well to treatment. We're joined today by Tao Zhou, an NSF-supported professor whose group works at the intersection of electronics, materials science, and bioengineering to improve human health. Professor Zhou, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
So I'm excited to talk to you about this new technology you've developed here. So let's start with defining what it is. What is the Caroflex device?
So Caroflex is a soft, stretchable, and 3D printed bioelectronic device that is designed to stimulate the carotid sinus, which is a small region near the branching point of the carotid artery in the neck. The carotid sinus contains pressure sensors that is called bioreceptors. These sensors help the body monitor the blood pressure, and when the blood pressure increases, they send signals to the brain, and the brain responds by adjusting heart rate, blood vessel tone, and other physiological processes to help lower the blood pressure. So in a way, I would say the carotid sinus is part of the body's natural blood pressure control system. Caroflex is designed to gently activate that system by using electrical stimulations to try to treat especially a group of patients called drug-resistant hypertension patients that do not respond enough to existing medicines on the market.
So you mentioned existing medicines. Can we explore a little bit? How is hypertension typically treated?
Okay, that's a good question. So hypertension is usually treated first with lifestyle changes and medications. So lifestyle changes can include reducing salt intake, improving diet, doing exercise, lose weight if needed, and also limiting alcohol intake. Medicine can include such as calcium channel blockers and other medicines. For some patients, those approaches work well, but there's a group of patients whose blood pressure remains high even after taking multiple medications. This is often called resistant hypertension. This is where the device-based approach becomes interesting. So instead of only changing chemistry through drugs, we can potentially modulate the body's own natural reflexes that regulate the blood pressure. So Caroflex is aimed at such type of future therapies. So it's not meant to replacing existing treatment today, but to explore a new pathway for people who do not respond enough to current medication options or patients who are not willing to take medicines every day.
So thinking about kind of the development of this device, were you intending to be working on hypertension treatment? What problem were you working on when this came together?
First, I was working on brains and other nervous systems, and I think blood pressure, because it affects a larger group of patients, so we start to working on this direction. And this idea basically comes from the desire to develop a novel method for patients to control their blood pressure without the need to take medicines every day. So although, as I mentioned, there's many medicines on the market for controlling blood pressure, but some patients, they just do not respond to very well to those medications. They even after take 3 or 5 different types of medicines every day, they still cannot get their blood pressure controlled.
It's a pretty high, relatively high percentage of people that this happens to, right? It's something like 10%.
Yeah, 10% or maybe like 14, maybe 14% of people. And also some people just do not want to take medicines every day. So we want to develop something that can, control their blood pressure more naturally and effectively to have them to get another option maybe,
So thinking about the device itself a little bit, how do you control it to send the stimulations?
So Caroflex is controlled by electrical stimulation, and the basic control method is similar to many bioelectronic devices. So the cover flux, it has electrodes, and those electrodes can deliver electrical pulses. And in our experiments, the device is connected to an external stimulator, and the stimulator delivers controlled electrical pulses through the soft hydrogel electrodes at the carotid centers. And we can control parameters such as stimulation voltage, pulse waves, frequency, and the duration. And those parameters can determine how strongly and how often the carotid sinus is activated.
Fantastic. So can we talk a little bit about the structure of the device? Like you mentioned that it's 3D printed. Can you talk a little bit about the layers and how it's working?
So Flux has a layered structure, so each layer has different function, I would say. One layer is a bioadhesive layer. This is the part that allows the device to attach to the carotid tissue itself without applying sutures. And another layer is the electrodes layer. This is the electrically active part of the device that delivers the electrical stimulations to the carotid centers. And also, there's a encapsulation layers that helps insulate and protect the electrode structure while maintaining the overall flexibility and softness of the device. So the device is fabricated using method called directly writing 3D printing methods through a layer-by-layer printing process. So 3D printing is good over here because it allows us to rapidly prototype the device, and we can change the geometry, the size, and the layout more easily compared with many other traditional microfabrication methods. So in the long term, this could also help us to personalize the device design because patients' anatomy can be different, can vary across different individuals. So the next step is to personalize the device according to the specific anatomy, maybe. Yeah.
Nice. So maybe bigger for people with wider veins, maybe smaller for people with smaller
Yes,
veins.
exactly. Yeah.
I understand you had to make a custom adhesive for this. Can you talk a little bit about the bioadhesive?
So the bioadhesive over here is made of mostly polymer-based hydrogel materials we used. I'm not going to go through our terms, but basically it's very soft materials like hydrogels, like our body. So our body is more like a natural hydrogel system. So it's made to be very close to the body itself, and it was designed so that it can attach to wet tissue. That's very important because when you implant, we need to implant on a wet tissue that's has water on it. So this adhesive was designed to be able to absorb some of the water and then stabilize here when we apply the device on. Yeah. Most important thing about CoverFlex is that it's special because we no longer need it to be sutured. That's a major part of it. So current device, it needs sutures to hold them in place to different organs. For sure, you can imagine this can cause damages to tissue. And CoverFlex use a different method with adhesion layer. So instead of you have to have a surgeon that with very good suturing skills, you can just have something directly appear. That's it. Can basically stick and use, make it much easier. And also, we specifically choose very soft materials to fabricate the device so that it can match the mechanics of the body tissue itself, so that it does not introduce mechanical mismatches or that can cause other problems. I think that's a major thing. Yeah.
Is it difficult working with more hydrogel-based products?
It's not super difficult, but it's a specific different types of materials. Some of them are not robust enough. They're soft, but then too fragile. When you touch it, they can break. So for this kind of application, we want something that is soft, but also it needs to be robust so that they can survive for a longer time. So we're targeting a lifetime, so it can it with, when people work out, do different kinds of things, even do yoga, it cannot
Right.
break, right? So this kind of thing needs some specific designs to at the material level to make sure this type of device was developed with something that's really meets this criteria. Then that part needs some design thinking and testing. Yeah.
Thinking about that, needing to move around and exercise, what might you introduce in the design to make it more resilient or stronger?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I would take the probably because there's different materials in our device. I will just take one example. For example, the electrical part. That's also a hydrogel part, and we used two components. That's one component is its mechanical phase, which does not, it's not super conductive, but it has very good mechanical property. And another part is more electrically conductive, but its mechanical properties not so good. It's very fragile, it can break. So our strategy is that we try to have them together by testing different solvents systems and test different concentrations of their ratios to make sure those two components, merge very well with each other, but still each phase is continuous. So that's what we have them together. One phase can support the resilience, and another phase can support its functionality. So they have both together. But it sounds simple here, but needs quite a few different testings, try different material systems, solvent systems on the different ratios. But yeah, that's a fun thing to work with here.
Thinking about the 3D printing, is there specific considerations or challenges 3D printing devices for biomedical uses?
Because this is still in the developing stage, we are one of the early people who are doing this. I think for one thing, if we want print, first of all, we want to have some good materials that's printable, right? And also, it cannot sacrifice the device performance. So the material needs to be printable, but also after print out, it still needs to be, electrically functional and also robust. This needs some good mechanical studies, designs, and material development all there. But overall, I think it's very promising. So, and also with this method, we can replace existing metal-based electrodes with more soft electrodes. I think I'm very, excited about this approach. I think we want to push this to really, clinical level applications.
So what was the biggest challenge in developing the Caraflex device?
Okay. So one of the major challenges to combine properties that usually do not naturally go together. For example, we need the device to be soft and stretchable, but also electrically functional. And we needed to adhere strongly to wet tissue, but not damaging that tissue. And we wanted to be stable in the physiological environment, but still flexible enough to move together with the artery. And another challenge is car designers itself, because it's a dedicated and dynamic location. So the artery also constantly moving with each heartbeat. That makes it different from attaching a device to a rigid surface that is dry and flat. And also, I think another challenge is its translation. So it's one thing to show a device concept in early studies, and it's another thing to develop into a therapy that could eventually be used in patients. That requires longer time safety studies, optimization of device designs, and also large animal studies, and eventually regulations and clinical pathways. So, yeah, I think the main challenges of there, but we hope we can address all of them and push this to the market.
So thinking about that, getting to market, can you elaborate a little bit? What needs to happen to bring it from like your benchtop testing to where someone who has this drug-resistant hypertension might have it as a therapy?
So I think the next step is to continue to optimize device so that it has good longer-term performance and safety. Right now, we want to further improve the material and the stimulation performance. And we need to study its long-term stability. to make the device stay attached stably in the long term, to maintain electrically functional over long term, and also do not cause chronic inflammation. And another step move towards real patient application is to scaling it from small animal models towards larger animal models to make it more clinically relevant, because the anatomy, movement, and the surgical environment in a large animal model is more close to human applications. Yeah, I think, and also then we need to go through the FDA approvals for sure, and then eventually do clinical trials first, and then if it works well, then we can expand to a larger group of patients for them to use it eventually. Yeah.
So thinking about that long-term use future, do you imagine that the device would be permanently installed? Would it be like similar to a pacemaker or something where the patient would just have this
That's
going forward?
good question. Yeah. So I think for sure our goal is to have the device, mostly permanently be on the patient body to help them modulate their blood pressure in a lifetime, scenario. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
I also want to ask you about your NSF award. You got a career award, and how has that impacted what work you're doing in your lab?
Also, through my NSF Career Award, NSF supported the broader vision of my lab, is to create soft, stretchable, and tissue-like bioelectronic interfaces. And that support helped us develop some material thinking, device design principles, and student training environments that made this type of project possible. So CarFlex builds on that broader foundation, and they use many ideas that are central to my ASF-supported research direction, I'd say. Yeah.
Thinking about the future, what are you excited to work on in the next few years?
So I think in the future, I'm excited mostly about the broader future of tissue-like bioelectronics. So CarFlex is one example we work on, but the general idea is much larger. For example, we can interface with the brain, the spinal cord, other nervous systems, or other organs with our soft and tissue-like bioelectronics. And in the future, I think the bioelectronic medicine will move beyond rigid implants, and we will see devices that look and behave more like tissue, and those devices can interface with different types of organs without causing mechanical irritations or inflammations. I think I'm also excited about combining 3D printing with patient-specific designs. So we are working on to incorporate imaging data, for example, MRI or CT scan of the patient's specific anatomy. And then according to the specific anatomy, we can design a specific fitting device to fit exactly with the patient so that it can create more precise and safer therapies with our bioelectronic-based medicine method.
Special thanks to Tao Zhou. For the Discovery Files, I'm Nate Potker. Please subscribe wherever you get podcasts, and if you like our program, share with a friend and consider leaving a review. Discover how the U.S. National Science Foundation is advancing research at nsf.gov.